Welcome to The Simple Sophisticate, where in 2014, this podcast premiered. And now in its 11th season, the show continues to focus on the same principles it was founded upon: the art of living a life of quality over quantity. Topics range from creating an everyday life you love living, strengthening mindfulness practices, building a capsule wardrobe, preparing seasonally delicious meals, traveling and exploring France and Britain, and living life to the fullest without breaking the bank, because living well really is quite simple. I'm your host, Shannon Ables, and whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, en route, or returning from that dream destination, or sitting down with a hot cuppa or a cafe au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 403rd episode of The Simple Sophisticate. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you today's topic, because what we're going to talk about is something that has been basically indirectly referenced, talked about briefly from time to time for years here on the podcast and on the blog. And as I was diving more deeply into the research for the Contentment Masterclass in the last couple of years, I began to realize, yep, this is right. This is true as far as this is where these ethos come from. What am I talking about? I'm talking about contentment and what contentment truly is and where it's derived from. And there are so many overlaps when we talk about contentment with the Buddhist psychology. And I say Buddhist psychology because there's a lot of misunderstanding around what Buddhism is. And we're going to talk about that today too. So specifically what we're going to share today are 10 ways integrating Buddhist psychology into your everyday life cultivates contentment. I am fairly confident you're doing quite a few of these. Probably most of them consciously and maybe some of them unconsciously. And the more conscious we know that these particular approaches to living and thus living well, then we can hone them even more and see our unique way of living, because each of us will live uniquely, how our unique way of living will elevate and the quality will deepen. So before I get into all that, what is today's petit plaisir? Well, it is May, and that means we're in the thick of gardening. And whether you have a garden or not, whether you have any kind of outdoor space or not, I'm going to share with you my approach to the garden pots for shade plants. And so when I had houses that didn't have a lot of garden, or I just had a space for a pot on my porch that was typically a covered porch, I always did this combination, and I've fine-tuned it over the many years. And I'm doing it again this year. I do it every single year. I'm so excited to share it with you because no matter where you live, the city, anywhere, countryside, out with a lot of land, you can do this too. And it's a very tranquil, to go with our topic of the podcast episode today, a tranquil arrangement, but it's also very low maintenance. You just have to water it regularly and not a lot because it is a shade plant. So anyway, I'm excited to share with you how to put that together for a minimal cost for beauty on your porch for the entire spring, summer, and even into the fall. All right. Now let's chat about our focus for today. 10 ways integrating Buddhist psychology into your everyday life cultivates contentment. Let me begin with a quote that will give you a taste of what we're going to talk about today and what the Buddhist psychology really is. This comes from Steve Hagan, who wrote the book Buddhism Plain and Simple, The Practice of Being Aware Right Now, Every Day. Quote, Buddhism is not a belief system. It's not about accepting certain tenets or believing a set of claims or principles. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's about examining the world clearly and carefully and testing everything and every idea. Buddhism is about seeing. It's about knowing rather than believing or hoping or wishing. It's also about not being afraid to examine anything and everything, including our own personal agendas. The message is always to examine and see for yourself. When you see for yourself what is true, and that's really the only way that you can genuinely know anything, then embrace it. Until then, just suspend judgment and criticism. The point of Buddhism is just see. That's all. An ordinary person is simply one who is not awake in the moment. A Buddha, lowercase Buddha, is a person who is. That's all. End quote. To be fully human and see the humanity in all others, to have compassion for all sentient beings, understanding that they too experience all of the senses and are capable of emotions. This way of walking through life, of engaging with life subtly yet powerfully, infusing both our daily life and others' lives with the ability to be and express our full and most capable selves, is to live with awareness, to see fully and engage fully without expectation or harm. For example, let's go to the garden for a moment. One of the ladybird or ladybug's gifts is their appetite for many pests in the garden. They are a gardener's best friend, truly. They effectively become a natural pest deterrent. The talent of bees is to disperse pollen, which plays a crucial role in the entire food production chain. And as we consider any human on earth throughout history who gives of their talents that further contributed positively to the world, these brave and determined souls, without each one, the world would not be as we know it today. When we celebrate the humanity of another, we set each other free to discover the treasures we each uniquely have within us. Then it is each individual's job, at times daunting, but most primarily exhilarating, to share with the world what we have realized to be our dharma, what we can uniquely share with the world that also energizes us while we engage in the giving. There is much confusion about what Buddhism is. And unlike what many Google searches will retrieve or AI Google searches will retrieve when we try to figure it out, it is not a religion. Let me just say that again. Buddhism is not a religion. The Dalai Lama himself states it most directly, quote, "Buddhist teachings are not a religion. They are a science of the mind," end quote. In other words, it is an approach to understanding our own mind, not being told what to think, nor how to live concretely. Rather, the concepts of mindfulness, awareness, compassion, appreciation, and courage are many of the fundamental skills, which are also the core concepts of cultivating a life of contentment, a simply luxurious life, which is why I wanted to bring today's episode to you. Earlier this spring, I took some time to update the Start Here page on the blog. You find it on the menu bar underneath the header, and then you click on Introductions, and I've provided a link to it on the show notes for today's episode. Because, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, after years of learning how to live a life of contentment and reading book after book by various experts in the field of both psychology, neurology, and mindfulness, there were common themes that kept repeating themselves across all three. These principles also appear in the ethos of Buddhism. But I want to point out, and I understand this too, anytime a word with the suffix ism appears, it understandably can prompt a raised eyebrow of curiosity. After all, ism is derived from the Greek word ismos, I-S-M-O-S, which means the act or practice of doing something, and often is also understood in the English language to mean a system or a doctrine. And while, yes, Buddhism is an act or practice of doing something, it is not a religion, as a religion relies on a deity or divine revelation, and Buddhism does not do this. Rather, Buddhism is a personal practice of self-discovery and considered a philosophy of understanding the mind, the human condition, and discovering our full potential for freedom and greatness. I've included two sources. One is an interview with Jack Kornfield, who I will be talking more about in our episode today, and one that's written through Elephant Journal, both explaining why Buddhism is not a religion. But we'll talk a little bit more about it here today as well. Most importantly, why Buddhism doesn't technically fit with what we, the Western world, associate with words that end in ism is because, as Steve Hagan points out, from the individual who I shared the quote from at the top of the episode, in his book, Buddhism Plain and Simple, quote, It is a process, an awareness, an openness, a spirit of inquiry, not a belief system or even a religion. End quote. He likens Buddhism, in fact, to a raft, something that provides us the tools. So, safe carriage across a waterway in this instance, a raft protects us from falling in the water, drowning, whatever, or, keeps us from staying put on one side of the river. He likens Buddhism to a raft, something that provides us the tools and teaches us skills to get across the water that had previously been a barrier, uncrossable. So, in the instance of this analogy, it's equating to that figuring out how to understand ourselves and then how to engage with the world with love, kindness, and integrity as we find our Dharma, as we find what brings us to life and how to courageously share it with the world. That's what Buddhism is giving us the skills to figure out. But what each of us is figuring out, what we will learn, is unique to each of us. No one's going to find the same thing. And that's something we've talked about here on the blog and the podcast, that your Simply Luxurious life is going to be different from everyone else's because it has to align with who you innately and passionately are, right? What brings you to life. And once we get across the river, so we're back to the analogy of the raft. Once we get across the river, quote, you must leave the raft behind, end quote. So remember, the raft is Buddhism. So let me explain that a little bit more. However, unlike a dogma or a religion, Buddhism requires that you move forward in what you have discovered once it has helped you to discover it. Once Buddhism, the tools have helped you discover your Dharma, discover how to know who you are and embrace it courageously. Hagan writes, quote, if we hang on to Buddhist teachings or any teachings, they will ultimately become a hindrance. Buddhist teachings and writings can assist you, but you won't find truth, and he capitalizes truth here, in them, as if truth somehow resided in the Buddha's words. No words, Buddha's, mine, or anyone else's, can see for you. You must do that for yourself, end quote. In other words, Buddhism teaches us how to think well, so understanding how our mind works, the skills to harness its strengths to open us up to the knowledge that is already within us. We just have to learn how to get in there and find it and trust it. But it doesn't tell us what to think. I liken it to teaching versus preaching. There is something that I would always say to my students in AP language, and I would say this to the parents on parent night too, to kind of give them awareness of what this class was about. And it was AP language is a course about how to write, not literature where we're reading certain things and analyzing those pieces of work. In rhetoric or in AP language, we're reading a lot of different texts, primarily nonfiction. And then they were also writing different texts, but it was a way of writing with rhetoric for effective, persuasive intent. And also to read it with critical thinking skills, to understand the author's intent effectively as well. So to give objectivity to the reader so that they're aware of the tools that are being used, so that they are not influenced unless they choose for themselves to be influenced. All right, so that awareness and critical thinking skills played a huge role in the teaching of AP language. And so I would tell the students and the parents as well, I would tell them, I am not here to tell you what to think. That would be preaching. In other words, that would be the dogmatic or parochial approach. I would be basically saying you can only think this and you can't think anything else. No. Rather, I am here to teach you how to think, give you the skills and the tools, and you can use it however you need to unearth your unique journey forward. Okay. And that is what Buddhism is. Okay. Here's another quote to ponder. Quote, Buddha's words can also be likened to a finger pointing to the moon. Again, another analogy, all right? His teachings can point to the truth, so how to find it for yourself, the truth about yourself, your inner compass, your true self, and to help you find your gifts and to find your life journey. But they cannot be the truth. Buddhas, people who are awake, can only point the way for themselves individually. We cannot hold truth with words. We can only see it, experience it for ourselves. So I hope that helps a little bit about what Buddhism is. To go a little bit further, I think it's also important to point out that those who practice Buddhism come from all walks of life, from all different types of religions, from no religion at all, from people that are agnostic or as I said, atheists, or they could be Christians, so they can be Catholic, they can be Judaism, Muslim, they can be any belief system or no belief system at all. And there are many, many, many people that either believe in a certain religion but are also learning the skills that Buddhism is teaching, or have no religious background at all and choose not to have any religious background at all and embrace Buddhism for their life journey to figure out their true selves and how to engage with the world peacefully, but also with compassion and integrity. Here's a quote from Jack Kornfield, and he is a trained Buddhist monk. He trained in Thailand. He lives in the United States, and he has been credited with bringing Buddhism to the West. He has a doctorate also in clinical psychology, and he is the founder of two of the largest Buddhist centers and communities in America. And I am going to use a lot of the quotes from his book, The Wise Heart, throughout today's episode. He writes that Buddhism is a living psychology. Quote, one of the oldest and most well-developed systems of healing and understanding on the face of the earth, end quote. So back to the parallels of the ethos of Buddhism and living a life of contentment. Buddhism's purpose is to bring deep healing, well-being, and inner freedom. Contentment, which is experienced when we understand the mind, engage with the world and ourselves with loving kindness and integrity, occurs when we live fully in the present. Jack Kornfield shares that when we, quote, live in the present, joy arises for no reason. This is the happiness of consciousness that is not dependent on particular conditions, end quote. That joy that he talks about is what contentment feels like. It comes from within. Contentment is not dependent on external circumstances, but rather, as I teach in detail in the Contentment Masterclass, is a mode of travel. No matter what the weather or road conditions, to use the analogy for how we travel through our days and along our life journey, it doesn't matter what's swirling around outside of us. We are at peace within ourselves. We determine our joy, knowing how to engage with the world in a way that is true to what we know about ourselves, our strengths, our passions, and our values, but also contributing positively to the world with whom or whatever crosses our paths, things we cannot control. With all of that said, I wanted to bring today's episode to you to share how living a simply luxurious life integrates the psychology of Buddhism. I will be, as I mentioned, citing quotes from Jack Kornfield's book, The Wise Heart, a guide to the universal teachings of Buddhist psychology, throughout this episode. And while it is a tome of a book, it has over 400 pages, it is a book that offers an approachable understanding of the 26 principles of Buddhist psychology, taught directly in the book, but also with anecdotes to help further understanding. And if a quote is shared that's not from Jack Kornfield, I will make sure to state that. But otherwise, if it's a quote, it's from the book. All right. So with that said, let's take a look at just 10, and there are many, many more ways that likely you are already incorporating the psychology of Buddhism into your everyday life that further cultivates contentment. Number 1, respecting the humanity in all, others and yourself. Quote, each of us needs to find our way to be whole and free, end quote. The Buddha nature is simply the truth of who each of us really is. And if you have, for example, taken a yoga class, likely it ended with the salutation of Namaste, which simply means I honor the divine within you. In other words, I will not harm you. And while we may be different, we are all human and thus respect one another and value each other's dignity to live freely as our unique selves. By doing this, we build trust. The respect given, interestingly enough, begins with respecting ourselves. When we are able to be respectful to ourselves, we are then able to truly respect another. Respecting ourselves doesn't mean growth is ignored. With regards to, we're not saying right now I'm just perfect the way I am. We're not saying anything about perfection, but we are saying we are enough and we are respecting where we are in our journey. And we're also understanding that we can continue to change, to develop and grow. This too is part of honoring our true nature. So that is number 1, respecting the humanity in all, ourself and others. Number 2, engaging with the world with kindness and compassion. Quote, compassion is our deepest nature. It arises from our interconnection with all things, end quote. Over the past few years here on the podcast and on the blog, The Simply Luxurious Life, we've talked about two guiding principles for how to engage every day, both with ourselves and others. One, we just mentioned above in number one, this respecting ourself and honoring and doing what nourishes our true nature, so engaging with integrity. The other is to engage with loving kindness. When we remember to always engage with both of these practices or these approaches, so we simply say with integrity and loving kindness, healing can occur because we are seeing both ourselves, others, and the situation clearly. Compassion is possible when we give ourselves regular time to quiet the mind and be still. It becomes easier to do this when we exercise our mind through meditation, which, as we have discussed in detail in a post on the blog, and then even further in the Contentment Masterclass, meditation is not a stopping of our thoughts, but rather of observing them. In other words, we step back and become almost a third party watching our thoughts and feelings pass by because they will, they're evanescent. We don't react, but rather observe. We don't engage with them rashly. We sit back, observe, and decide, should I hang on to this one? Is it worth responding? No, I'll let it go. When we can observe our thoughts, we begin to gain clarity and it becomes far easier to be compassionate. Cornfield points out that compassion is difficult when we have either experienced trauma or are clouded by ignorance, false teachings, or influences on how life should be lived. Quote, on the global scale, ignorance manifests as injustice, racism, exploitation, and violence. On a personal scale, we see our own states of envy, anxiety, addiction, and aggression, end quote. But the good news is that who we are naturally, innately, is compassionate. Once we can become quiet and be honest about the layers of ignorance and trauma and slowly begin to remove them, perhaps we'll need to reach out for expert help to get past them, but that isn't always necessary, but it might be, then we will find the ability and the tranquility to be kind, both to ourselves and others. And this is what brings about that healing. So number 2 is engaging with the world with kindness and compassion. Number 3 is exhibiting courage by being compassionate and being loving. Quote, great courage is not demonstrated by aggression or ambition. Aggression and ambition are more often expressions of fear and delusion. The courageous heart is the one that is unafraid to open to the world. With compassion, we come to trust our capacity to open to life without armoring, end quote. Instead of hatred, care. Instead of violence, kindness. This doesn't mean we toss away boundaries for ourselves so that we can stay nurtured. We can still say no, but we do this with a courageous and kind heart. There's that loving kindness comes into play there because that is to honor our integrity. And in so doing, we are at peace because we have engaged peacefully yet with dignity. So number 3 is exhibiting courage, true courage, by being compassionate and being loving. Number 4 is understand our mind and become the master of it, not ignorant of all that it can do. Quote, Buddhist psychology helps us work with thoughts in 2 important ways. First, it teaches us how to acknowledge the content of our thoughts. Second, we learn the ability to disentangle from them, end quote. Meditation is a practice that, as we just mentioned in number 2, gives us the opportunity to practice stepping back from being at the center of our swirling mind. It doesn't stop our mind from thinking, but it removes our engagement from rolling with whatever our mind and emotions grab us to do and pull us to go. Pull us, they want us to swirl with them. No. We pull ourselves away from the swirl so we can be the observer. And it is when we begin questioning our thoughts, quote, that we are then at the heart of a Buddhist practice, end quote. This is yet another reason Buddhism is not a religion. It is not telling us what to think, but rather to think for ourselves. And most importantly, think clearly without reacting to every thought and emotion that pops up. Instead, being as objective as possible, stepping back and assessing, what is this emotion? Why am I having it? What triggered it? And then we apply the 4 questions. Here is how we can begin to master those moments where things pop up that really unsettle us, are really discontenting or discomforting. It's going to mimic the questions that I shared in book number 3, The Road to the Papillon. And these 4 questions are from Byron Katie, and they align with the Buddhist approach. The first question of any thought that you might have is to say or ask, 1, is it true? Maybe you've stated an opinion or you have a judgment, and then you stop yourself and go, but is that true? And then the second question is, how can you absolutely know that it's true? And the thing about this one is you can skip number 2 if your answer to number 1 is no, it's not true. If it's not true, then you skip to number 3. And number 3 is, how do you react when you believe that thought? So maybe you know it's not true, but you're still holding on to it. Well, then ask yourself this question: how do you react when you believe that thought? In other words, how do you feel? What does that do for you? Is it beneficial? How does it serve you? And 4 is, who would you be without that thought? In other words, likely your thoughts are creating a story that is cultivating a life that is not nourishing for you. So this is how you can rationally and fairly quickly, just going through these 4 questions, step away from it. I have linked to Byron Katie's website where she details how to really work through these 4 questions. But those are the 4 questions just right out of the gate. And if that's a tool that will help you, I encourage you to explore that further. Again, that link is on the show notes to Byron Katie's 4 questions. So often the stories we let run amok in our mind have no legs, so to speak. In other words, when we finally step back, and begin to question the veracity of these thoughts, we realize they have no substance, and thus we can help ourselves out by not letting them prompt us to worry, fear, or act rashly. Throughout the Contentment Masterclass, I teach students, through support from neuroscience experts and teachers in psychology, what exactly is going on in the mind and why it fears, why it wants to react, and how to constructively learn the skills that will enhance rather than shrink the quality of our everyday life. So these are skills to learn. We don't come out of the womb knowing how to understand our mind and engage with it effectively. We just don't. We have to choose to be the student. And that is the huge component. That is at the heart of Buddhism psychology. So that's number 4. Understand our mind and become the master, and not be ignorant of all that it can do. Number 5 is to live mindfully. Quote, the point of mindfulness is not to get rid of thought, but to learn to see thought skillfully. The Buddhist tradition trains the thinking mind and intellect to think clearly and well, end quote. Pausing is something we talked about recently on the blog in a Monday motivational post. Brings healing and gives us clarity. Tara Brach teaches the skill of radical acceptance, and I included a lot of what she teaches about that in that particular post, which I did link to in the show notes under number 5. She is an internationally known teacher of mindfulness and meditation, and Brach reminds us that to live mindfully, we don't react, but instead we pause. By pausing, we avoid inflicting any unnecessary pain or harm, either to ourselves or others, with our words or actions. This is to live mindfully. What exactly, yet simply put, is mindfulness, you may be asking? Quote, mindfulness is attention, end quote. We are not casting judgment, yet seeing clearly all that is without reacting or jumping into it, because when we do that, we bring our assumptions based on past experiences, however accurate our understanding of those events were, into the space, and thus we aren't being mindful. When we begin to live mindfully, we actually set ourselves free. Free from expectations, criticism, and competition. This is not to say we become a lazy sloth, but rather our intentions point us in the direction we wish to travel, and we engage fully with what is happening in the present moment. We fully see it and observe it without framing it in any sort of way to fit our story. I put air quotes around story because it's not holding the whole truth. Quote, mindful attention to any experience is liberating. Mindfulness brings perspective, balance, and freedom, end quote. Our ability to be mindful will help us heal and move through uncomfortable, even painful times in a constructive way that, while not easy, provides the tools that will bring us peace in how we move through these difficult times. Quote, mindfulness does not reject experience, it lets experience be the teacher, end quote. In other words, we do not suppress our emotions of grief, sadness, anger, anything that is unwanted, but rather acknowledge it, let ourselves feel it, and engage with it healthily, as well as prevent us from clinging to unhelpful stories that cause further unnecessary pain, either to ourselves or others. So number 5 is we live mindfully. All right. I have 2 sponsors I'd like to introduce you to, and then I'll return and we'll talk about the final 5 ways incorporating Buddhist psychology into our everydays helps us cultivate contentment. I'll be right back. The Simple Sophisticate is sponsored by Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth's mission is to transform your 5 to 9, so your sleeping time, the time that matters the most, into the most comfortable part of your day. Now I had the opportunity, I'm having the opportunity to sleep in their pajamas every single night. For the past month of April, I have been sleeping in their navy with white piping edged pajamas, and I truly have had the most wonderful nights of sleep. The fabric is breathable. It keeps me warm, but not hot. I wake up fully rested after 8-9 hours of sleep with their breathable fabric and buttery soft texture on the skin. I wake up feeling rested and excited to begin the day. And the most beautiful part is they give you an opportunity to try out their clothing, their bed products. They offer a 100-night sleep trial. Enjoy over 3 months to experience the unmatched comfort of Cozy Earth. If you're not completely satisfied and in love with your bedding, you can return it hassle-free. And I have a feeling, spoiler alert, you won't want to. I know I don't. They also have a 10-year warranty on all bedding products. They stand behind the quality of their bedding with a decade-long warranty. That means years of luxurious, worry-free sleep, knowing your investment is protected. Luxury shouldn't be out of reach, so use the promo code SIMPLE for 40% off the best-selling sheets, pajamas, and more. I'm confident you won't regret it. Sanctuary awaits at Cozy Earth. The Simple Sophisticate is also sponsored by Indeed. So maybe you just realized that your business needed to hire someone yesterday, and you wonder, how can you find an amazing candidate fast? Well, that's easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you stand out and hire fast. With Sponsored Jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. And I too have been in that situation where you're like, oh, I need to fix something on my website. Well, I put in the specifics, I find the expert, they're able to help me quickly and get the job done well. And that's why I trust Indeed. Plus, with their Indeed Sponsored Jobs, there are no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. That's great. How awesome is that? How fast is Indeed? In the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of the Simple Sophisticate podcast get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/simple. Just go to Indeed.com/simple right now and support the Simple Sophisticate by saying you heard about Indeed on this show. Indeed.com/simple. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Welcome back. Let's get right back into our list of the 10 ways to integrate Buddhist psychology to cultivate contentment in your everyday life. So, number 6 is suffering is not inevitable. Quote, suffering is different from pain. Suffering is our reaction to the inevitable pain of life. End quote. Suffering is often believed to be something, due to being human, that we must endure, that we cannot escape it. Many religions teach this approach. Even some in the world of psychology teach this, Freud, for example. But this need not be the case. Often the confusion is in the word choice. Pain is different from suffering. Pain, as the quote mentions above, is inevitable. We will experience pain because we are human. There is so much in the world we will never be able to control. And yes, some of these uncontrollable events and occurrences will not be wanted and thus will cause us pain. But, quote, freedom from suffering is possible when we let go of our reactions, our fear, and our grasping. That is the Buddhist psychology. Something we began talking about way back in 2017 on the blog and also here on this podcast, actually in episode 145, is the difference between responding and reacting. And I've linked to it on the show notes if you want to check it out. It's when we react that we aren't being mindful, nor are we taking time to fully pay attention to not only what is going on outside of us, but why any emotion arises within us when something occurs that triggers that particular unwanted emotion. So, say an unwanted emotion rises, if we aren't addressing why it's arising, then we can perpetuate more what we may describe as pain, but actually it's suffering that is avoidable if we were willing to examine it and really explore what was happening and get to know ourselves. Again, sometimes this is easier when we can do it on our own. Sometimes we do need expert help to do that. So self-knowledge, awareness, gained through strengthening our emotional intelligence, something else we've talked about here on the podcast, as well as our mind through meditation and knowledge of how the brain works, gives us the tools to respond rather than react. So again, it's all about learning the tools and the skills. And that's something we've talked about in all different ways here on this podcast in my books, especially book number 2, Living the Simply Luxurious Life, and also on the blog, and then specifically and in great detail in the Contentment Masterclass. So that was one way that we can avoid suffering, is to choose and know how to respond rather than react. Another way we can avoid suffering is with regards to not engaging with our fear. So regarding fear, when we don't understand what fear is, we get in our own way and unnecessarily cause suffering. That suffering may occur immediately or it may occur down the road due to not making decisions that would be beneficial long term. But we made a decision based on fear rather than honoring our needs. In other words, fear is often our inner compass, pointing us in the direction of where we need to go, even if initially it may appear scary as there are many uncertainties. So the fear is going, no, don't do it. It's new. I don't understand it. Don't go there. We've never been there before. We've talked about this in the blog many times. But it's also, you fear it because you want it, because it's something that's speaking to you, that your inner compass knows more than you know consciously. Your subconscious is wiser than you realize. And so it's this not stepping away from fear, not letting fear pull you back, but rather letting fear be your compass. And as we've talked about before, the key is to make sure you're running towards something, not away from something. And so that's where we might make a decision that down the road we will regret. We want to make those decisions that we're like, oh, I'm glad I was brave enough to step through that fear. And then the other way we can reduce or eliminate additional suffering is to stop grasping. And grasping comes from the wanting something we don't currently have. Once we have the ability to know the difference between a healthy desire, because it's okay to want things, but we have to know the difference between a healthy desire that is nourishing, that will be nourishing to us, versus wanting something because we're lacking. We don't feel that we're enough, that we won't be okay until we acquire such and such. We can avoid that grasping that will cause us suffering. So another way of looking at this is through noting the difference between high and low pleasure, something that we talked about in book number 2, Living the Simply Luxurious Life. There is yet another misconception about Buddhism, that it condemns all desire, and this is simply not true. It does not. There is a distinction between healthy and unhealthy desire, something Kornfield talks about at length in chapter 13 in The Wise Heart. Once we understand the difference between the two, the unhealthy and the healthy desire, we will find freedom and we will avoid suffering. Quote, the idea is not to be without desire, but to have a wise relationship with desire. End quote. A healthy desire, quote, creates happiness based on wisdom and compassion, gives rise to care, stewardship, generosity, integrity, and spiritual growth, end quote. An unhealthy desire, quote, creates suffering based on greed and ignorance, gives rise to possessiveness, fear, avarice, and clinging, end quote. So you can see the distinction there of how desiring something is okay. It's healthy. It's part of being human and growth and connection. But then if there's other desires that actually will bring us down and cause suffering and pain and keep us small, basically, and not growing. Once we strengthen our awareness of how we create our own suffering, so by letting go of grasping, letting go of fear, letting go of reacting, we can begin to no longer get in our own way and refrain from making the inevitable painful moments of life any more difficult than they need to be. So pain is inevitable. Suffering is not. That is number 6. Number 7 is finding our Dharma sets us free. Now, this quote comes from Hong Po, a Chinese Zen master from many centuries ago. Quote, your true nature is something never lost to you, even in moments of delusion, nor is it gained at the moment of enlightenment. It is the nature of your own mind, the source of all things, your original luminous brilliance. You, the richest person in the world, have been going around laboring and begging, when all the while the treasure you seek is within you. It is who you are. End quote. How to find our Dharma is often the question and something that is taught in detail in the Contentment Masterclass. But what I would like to remind us about is how it all begins with caring for ourselves thoughtfully. And also to keep in mind, your Dharma, my Dharma, anyone else's Dharma is going to be unique to you. I can't tell you what your Dharma is going to be, but I can teach you the tools. Buddhism teaches you the tools to unearth it within yourself because it's already in there. It is a package waiting to be unwrapped. And what a celebration it is when you discover it. Oh my goodness. So one way to start leading yourself to figuring out what your Dharma is, it's a beautiful, fun thing to do, is to create simple rituals. Now, this is something Cornfield talks about in The Wise Heart as well, is that we have the ability to let go of the past and to reawaken ourselves. Reawaken, I love that because we already know. We have that knowledge within us. It's just a re-reminding, a refamiliarizing ourselves with our true nature. And often the best medicine and the best way to begin to hear what our inner compass is trying to make us understand is to create personalized, so very unique rituals, as simple as writing down what you're going to let go of in the new year. Write it down on a piece of paper. I did this over the winter solstice, and then you can either burn that piece of paper or you can let it dissolve in water, let it go. So you're literally seeing it disappear. So it's symbolic to you. That might be a ritual. It doesn't have to be something so spiritual in that sense. It could be how you care for yourself in your day. You know, your afternoon tea break where you sit down for 15 minutes, no matter what, and just listen to the bird song. Feel the sun on your face, step outside the office. Whatever those rituals are, they will be unique to you. And this is something we have talked about so much here on the blog and on the podcast, or on the blog and the podcast. And I've linked to all the posts. First, there's posts about exactly what a ritual is and how it's different from routine. That was an episode from about a year and a half ago on the podcast, and I've linked to that. And then also ideas of how to create nourishing ones for you. And then a list of ideas, maybe that'll spark something. So literal ideas of rituals. The rituals can be anything that nourishes you, helps you to still and thus quiet the mind so that you can be fully present and be grounded in your true self. Part of the reason rituals help is it's that clearing or that calming of the mind. So you can really see and hear your thoughts. Doesn't mean you're stopping them. And you start to realize, okay, this is what nourishes me. This is what doesn't. You're not rushing you're seeing more clearly. Back to the very first quote of this episode, you begin to see more clearly and start to make decisions that are in your best interests, whatever those decisions are. Once we find our Dharma, what we can uniquely give to the world that constructively contributes while also energizing us rather than draining us, even if who we give our gifts to is but one person who benefits, that is absolutely your Dharma. And your Dharma may evolve as you start becoming immersed in it. When you come to life, engaging with this, when you are fully present and alive, you are touching on something that is setting you free. That is what Dharma does. You found it. You've used the tools to find it, and it will be gradual. And it's not, something that's literally one word. This is your Dharma. You just start to feel your way through it. You honor what you discover, though, with each revelation. Trust what you learn about yourself along this journey, and then that too will give you the courage and strength to learn more and endure the temporary challenges, because there will be temporary challenges and decisions you're going to have to make that are new and different and uncomfortable for a moment. But this gives you strength, and it leads you to feeling something you've never felt before, a more peaceful existence in your everyday moments. And you're willing to endure those temporary challenges because you find that what you discover is giving you a purpose and an energy to wake up in the morning and be filled with exhilaration. Again, this is something, Dharma, we talk about in the Contentment Masterclass. So I'm just touching on concepts and ideas here. But that's ultimately what Buddhism is trying to help you figure out. What is your true nature? What can you give? But also, you're not just solely giving and not thinking of yourself. It's a two-way exchange. You're being fully energized and loving what you do. And it doesn't have to be a job. It can be just a way of life. And you do just have a regular career. That's something you do, but maybe it's not your Dharma. But for some people, it might be their job. Everyone's different. That's the beauty of it. All right, so that's number 7. Finding our Dharma sets us free. Number 8, love and protect all living things. Quote, in Buddhism, this reverence for all life is called virtue, and it is considered fundamental, end quote. When we talk about all living things, we include all humans, of course, as well as Mother Nature, her animals, plants, and creatures. There are 3 levels of virtue in Buddhism psychology, and the first is to stop harmful actions. This refers to harmful actions to others and ourselves. The second is to, quote, cultivate a reverence for life. We act with stewardship for the things of the earth and stand up for the truth, end quote. And the final virtue is the, quote, integrity of the awakened heart, end quote. In other words, we are thinking critically and not following blindly rules and dictates by others or institutions or cultures, but questioning and checking in with what we know to be real loving and compassionate values. So this, again, we're involving our critical thinking skills. We're seeing rather than just blindly following, blindly accepting. That's number 8, love and protect all living things. Number 9, forgiveness in order to heal and to find freedom. Quote, in Buddhist psychology, forgiveness is not presented as a moral commandment such as thou shalt forgive. No, it is understood as a way to end suffering, to bring dignity and harmony to our life, end quote. At the core of why forgiveness is a necessity has everything to do with us, the one who is suffering, by holding on to that pain. Quote, forgiveness is fundamentally for our own sake, for our own mental health. It is a way to let go of the pain we carry, end quote. While the journey through forgiveness often takes time and moves through stages, Cornfield shares them here: grief, rage, sorrow, hurt, and confusion. It is by letting ourselves feel this pain that we are holding on to and need to release by moving through it that forgiveness brings relief. If we can shift how we look at forgiveness to instead see it as both fierce and compassionate, we give ourselves back life and the ability to live fully without clinging to pain that is causing us unnecessary suffering. Keep in mind, we are not condoning or allowing or okaying the behavior that caused us pain. Absolutely not. but instead giving ourselves the freedom to move beyond it and to start living fully. That's number 9. Forgiveness in order to heal, to find freedom. And last but not least, number 10 is living peacefully. Quote, there is no separation between inner and outer, self and other. Tending ourselves, we tend the world. Tending the world, we tend ourselves. End quote. How we bring about the peace we seek begins with quieting our mind. Once we understand our mind, then we become aware and thus more mindful of why we are feeling the unwanted emotions that arise and can then examine them and take away their power. It all begins with quieting the mind. And the flip side, that is the gift we give ourselves, is that we discover with clarity who we are innately, what brings us to life, what energizes us. How is this possible? Because we are able to remove the layers of influence from others that have perhaps, with good intention by most, others maybe not, tried to help us figure out our way in the world. But the truth is, you are the only one that holds that map. Only you. What does quieting the mind look like? Be mindful of all the outside influences of ideas, from media, from news, social media, music with lyrics that purport any sort of belief or trend. When you begin to be mindful of all that surrounds you and how it influences your thinking, then you can begin mindfully welcoming into your days more nourishment and limiting the things or eliminating the things that you've identified as being quite influential in an unhelpful way. Once we honor what we discover, something we discussed in episode 307, How to Step into Your Fullest True Self, as taught by Martha Beck, we discover both the freedom we may have thought was impossible and also the peace of mind. Because now we feel at home within ourselves. We are no longer fighting what we do not understand that keeps rising up and asking us to pay attention. No more. And that brings peace each and every day, knowing we have found and are embracing our Dharma. When we are at peace, we are then able to engage more peacefully with the world. And the more people that are at peace within the world, the more the world will be peaceful. This is something that I wrote about in a post titled How Experiencing Inner Peace Contributes to a Peaceful World. And it may sound really grandiose and absurd, but if you break it down, you break this down, the people make up the world. The people choose who leads the world. The people are so powerful. And it really does start with figuring out how to find that peace within ourselves. And that is ultimately at the heart of what the Buddhist psychology teaches us, how to understand our mind so we can understand how to get in there inside each one of us and understand ourselves and then engage courageously in a peaceful but full of integrity approach. So that's number 10. There's the list. And as I mentioned, these are just 10. There are many more, but I hopefully have referenced a handful of sources that if anything spoke to you can and dive more deeply into it. I have a feeling that whatever your walk of life, wherever you are in your life journey at this moment, that you are practicing many of these ways of living already. Perhaps some are unconsciously being practiced, but now they are each consciously brought to your awareness. And to know how powerful each one of these can be to discovering how to live a life of contentment, we can then hone their ability within ourselves and explore what curiosities may bubble up to the surface, seemingly out of nowhere. Again, these are all hints that are leading you to your Dharma, whether you realize it or not. Now you fully do. That's the good news. When we give respect to our mind, to know it and then use it lovingly with compassion and respect to ourselves and others, our world intimately and grandly changes for the better. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I feel as though this was a long time coming episode of content that, while discussed here and there in so many posts and podcast episodes, needed to be put all in one place. You're already living so many of the components of what a life of true contentment involves, especially if you've been a listener or a reader for many years. But now with more consciousness, the experience can only deepen the quality of your unique approach, your unique life that honors your true self. So, wishing you many moments, days, and years to savor this life you are living. All right, you can find all that we talked about on the show notes at the simplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 403. And I'll be right back with this episode's Petit Plaisir. So this episode's Petit Plaisir is a pot, a garden pot for your porch, outdoor porch, a balcony, window, a basket, or a window, whatever you, I mean, it can actually be a hanging basket too, actually. If it's in the shade, it'd be perfect for it. So there's only 3 things I put in it. One of them's a perennial and the other 2 are annuals. So I love hostas. Hostas to me, I love green. Green is a color. In the garden, sometimes it can be forgotten as a color, but oh my gosh, having green as a color is just, it means things are alive, things are living. And there are tons of different hostas out there, all different sizes, all different colors of green. And depending on the size of your pot, you can get mini hostas, dwarf hostas, or you can get the huge ones depending on your pot. Okay, so every year in at least 2 of my pots, because they're on the porch underneath the shade and it faces east, so they really get no sun whatsoever, but I want flowers on my porch. I get a hosta, and then I get a coleus, which also come in brilliantly lovely colors, all different pinks and there's some yellows in there and oranges, and but there's also green in there. So you really can get all different types of colors of coleus, and coleus can grow huge, but again, they want shade and they're tender, so you don't put them out until the last frost is gone. And then I get a sweet potato vine or a creeping jenny, anything that drapes down. So you often will hear the advice, a spiller, a filler, and a star. There's all different ways of saying it. So you have something that's tall, something that's the filler, and then something that drapes over. But for me, the hosta is the star. It's the biggest plant. And then I fill with my coleus, usually 1 or 2 plants because I don't have huge pots. And then I have my spiller, that is the sweet potato vine, which can come in a very chartreuse green or a deep dark purple. Right now I have a deep dark purple, and I've just planted it last weekend. So you can see a picture of it on the blog. As it progresses through the summer, it'll get longer and longer and longer. I love them. They're really easy plants. All of these are such easy plants to take care of. And that's just it. So I have a hosta, a coleus. Oh, and another filler plant that is ideal for the shade and beautiful for color is a begonia. So if you have a favorite begonia, favorite color of the bloom, I like peach, then those are great ones. And you just deadhead the flowers and they keep blooming all summer. But they love the shade. They love the shade. So coleus or begonia, you have 2 easy plants to take care of. And then I have my sweet potato vine or a creeping jenny or whatever trailing plant you want. But a creeping jenny or a sweet potato vine can handle the shade. And that's what you want. You want shade plants. Those are my 3 plants that I would definitely go to. Very dependable, very easy to grow. And as long as they get watered, I water them. I mean, obviously you check the soil. If it's dry, you water them. But if they're in the shade, they're not getting a lot of heat until July or August. So in July and August, I might water them every day. Again, that's bend heat. It's very dry heat. We don't have any humidity whatsoever, so I would probably be the one watering them the most. But I would otherwise just water them every 4 days or so. You just check the soil. And not a lot, just a little bit. Anyway, so that's all you need. And then in the fall, because the hosta is a perennial, this is where I get all my hostas. I plant them around the house in the ground. So if you do have a garden or if you do have a front area or anywhere outside with plants, as long as it's in the shade, plant your hosta that was in your pot. And over the years, your hosta is going to get so big, and no matter how big the leaves are, it'll just keep naturalizing and getting bigger and more and more leaves. So you get a free plant for the rest of your life at this house, wherever you live, or apartment, front, or stoop, wherever you live. And it'll come up in about May. May is when mine are starting to poke up. They're not full in the garden yet, but some of them are getting there. And then the other 2 are annuals, so you can't keep the coleus and the sweet potato vine unless you have a really, really mild climate. But anyway, it's just a simple little arrangement that you can have on your front porch by your door as long as it's in the shade, and it really will last up until the first frost in the fall. So simple. I think I got the hosta at Home Depot for I think $15. That's gonna be the most expensive, the hosta. And then the other 2 are just a couple dollars each. That's it. So for under $20, I have a plant that's going to last all summer and into the fall. And then, of course, you want a pot. Real quick note about the pot. I know if you're a gardener, you already know this, but just in case you don't know, with your pot, you want to make sure there's a hole in the bottom so there's drainage, and then put a crock over the top of the hole so that it doesn't get clogged. So anything that's kind of domed or rounded, that's ceramic or glass, something that's going to make sure that there's just a little air pocket in the bottom so the water can drain through and the soil doesn't clog it. And then just put traditional potting soil. And that's it. So simple and so fun. I love potting these up in the spring. I did 3 of them this weekend. And if you haven't already, you can follow me on my gardening Instagram account, which is Le Papillon Garden. So LEPAPILLON Garden. We have a small following, but this is where I really just inundate people with pictures of my garden, and it's doing really well this year. It's the 5th year I've been here at this house. We've put a lot of gradual investments into it. It's small. It's definitely small, but it's my cottage garden. It's definitely a cottage garden, and it's been really, really nourishing this spring. Norman loved garden, so he's with me in spirit when I'm out there, and Nell loves gardening. So anyway, then of course I write a monthly detailed post about what I'm doing in the garden, what I'm learning, books and tools and all that fun stuff, video tours of the garden on the blog. Each month there's a gardening post for our top tier members. Okay, so that's my gardening tip from the amateur garden here in Bend, Oregon. It's just so much fun. I hope maybe it inspires you to get your hand in the dirt and give yourself a beautiful, simple shade potted arrangement. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Petit Plaisir, where each episode ideas are shared to make the everyday all the more enjoyable. Tune in at the end of each episode where I'll recommend a book, a film, a show, a recipe, anything that is a simple pleasure to satiate your sophisticated taste. And again, you can find a photo of the pot on the show notes, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 403. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I want to give you a heads up on the next episode, which will be in 2 weeks' time. On the 21st of May, we will be in the throes of British Week, the 7th annual British Week. And so our next episode, 404, will be a British-themed episode, and it's going to be about clothing. Effortless, stylish, dependable clothing inspired by the British. So be sure to tune in, and until then, I will see you on the blog. Bonne journée. Thank you for tuning in to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, visit the blog, The Simply Luxurious Life, with the shortened URL tsll.co or thesimplyluxuriouslife.com. For more in-depth exploration of how to cultivate your own unique, simply luxurious life, pick up my new book, which became both a bestseller and #1 new release in France Travel, The Road to Le Papillon, Daily Meditations on True Contentment. Available in all 4 formats for your preferred reading or listening. My first book, titled Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, and my second book, Living the Simply Luxurious Life, are also available in each of the 4 formats. Readers can now join the more intimate The Simply Luxurious Life international community by becoming members of the blog, which offers the benefits of ad-free reading site-wide, unlimited access and exclusive access to content on the blog, such as the monthly A Cup of Moments with Shannon video chat, tours of my home Le Papillon, the monthly What Made Me Smile post, and monthly Ponderings post, as well as the exclusive opportunity to enter all of the giveaways during the annual French and British weeks. To stay caught up on all things Simply Luxurious, the podcast, blog post, the cooking show, and receive exclusive news, as well as an extra dose of inspiration to jumpstart each new month, subscribe to the Simply Luxurious Life's free monthly newsletter, arriving on the last day of each month in your inbox. There is also a weekly newsletter, which is also free, and arrives each Friday to keep you caught up on the recent weekly posts on the blog. Enjoy with a hot cuppa or cup of morning coffee, and stay in the know about all things simply luxurious. Look for 2 new episodes of this podcast on the 1st and 3rd Wednesday of each month. And until next time, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Thank you for tuning in. Bonne journée.